The Gothic cathedral was a kind of miracle, the tangible result of 2 centuries of economic growth and prosperity, especially in the cities. By the 13th century, the cities became magnets for farmers bringing their new surpluses, for traders eager to buy and sell, and for a new international merchant class who worked from warehouses and docks along the waterways, like this one here at Amiens. The medieval city provided excitement, opportunity, and freedom. As the cities grew, they competed with each other for trade and business, just as cities do today. International traders, cloth merchants, and grain dealers mingled with the faithful outside the house of God. One of the things that attracted people and encouraged them to come from far away, bringing their money with them, was the relics. In most cases, the greater the cathedral, the greater and more powerful the relics it contained. This is said to be the head of St. John the Baptist, kept among the treasures at Amiens. It was brought back to France by the Crusaders, who scoured the Holy Land for relics such as this. The relics and the miracles they could produce were considered so important in the Middle Ages that King Louis IX paid a fortune for what he believed to be Christ's authentic crown of thorns. There is more than a little dispute about whether it actually was. There were several crowns of thorns making their way through Europe at that time, all equally well authenticated. So there was a strong connection between a cathedral's drawing power and its town's wealth, a definite link between business and religion. For example, the town docks at Amiens were jointly owned by the merchants and the cathedral chapter. A town's relation to its bishop could often be strained. In 1112, the citizens here in Laon were so unhappy with their cruel and cynical Bishop Gaudry that they bought a communal charter from the king to separate themselves from him. When Gaudry got back to town, he paid the king even more to annul the charter, leading to considerable unrest. Gaudry's soldiers murdered the leader of the townsmen in cold blood. So the outraged citizens marched right into this palace, dragged the bishop out, cut his head off, and set fire to the cathedral and to the palace. The new bishop had to send the local relics on tour twice, just to pay for repairs. Financing a cathedral was hardly ever an easy task, even in the pious Middle Ages. 100 years after Laon, the people of Reims rose in bloody revolt against heavy taxation and halted construction for years. In fact, peasants all over France who could least afford it were often made to bear the heaviest financial burden. Construction taxes forced many peasants to borrow from city merchants and moneylenders, who themselves would profit handsomely again once the cathedral was completed. Ironically, the local parish churches sometimes suffered most of all, as they had to stop their own building projects and repairs and pledge large sums of money to the cathedral fund.
This is the tombstone of Uly Berger, the architect and master builder of Saint-Nicaise here in Reims. He's holding a model of the church, and around him are the implements he used in overseeing its construction: a measuring stick, a pair of calipers, and a square. These were just about the only tools a medieval builder like our Guillaume de Senlis would have had to supervise the building of a structure like this. What he lacked in technology, the medieval builder had to make up in ingenuity and personal skill. Not only did he have to be able to read and write, but he also needed a keen understanding of applied geometry, substantial knowledge of the existing buildings of his time, and as if this weren't enough, he also had to be able to manage the multitude of workers required for such an undertaking. There were as many as 50 individual sculptors working at Amiens, and considerably more than that here at Reims. The organization and planning must have been nothing less than incredible. The most important craftsmen were the stonemasons. They were divided into the rough masons who cut, mortared, and laid the heavy stone, and the freemasons who carved and laid the more intricate stonework, such as the ribbing, the tracery, and all the ornamentation. All the masons served a long and rigorous apprenticeship. They were highly organized and mobile, traveling from town to town wherever there was work. Now, under the masons served the quarrymen, the mortar mixers, and the carriers, which often included oxen. Those animals were considered so important here at Laon, by the way, that they were immortalized in stone in the towers. None of the menial laborers were treated as well as the masons, and none were paid much for their work, particularly the oxen. At one cathedral whose records still survive, workers began in the summer before 5 a.m. and continued on until 7 or 8 in the evening, a 14 or 15-hour day, with a half hour for breakfast, 1.5 hours for lunch and a short nap, they must have needed it by then, and a half hour for a late afternoon snack. In the winter, the people who managed not to be laid off only worked a 9-hour day. Around every cathedral, virtually all labor was skilled, to some degree, as well as professional and organized. There's the story of the cult of the carts from Chartres, where noble citizens were supposed to have hitched themselves to wagons to help transport building materials. It's very romantic and very moving, but very doubtful. Many other tales have come down to us about amateurs so inspired by the undertaking that they were willing to work for free. In fact, there's an epic song of the period about a pious local man who worked entirely for love, wouldn't accept any money for his labors. The other workers killed him, and there's plenty of opportunity for that at a place like this. Money for the construction project was handled by the cathedral's chapter. Here at Amiens, the chapter house actually adjoins the cathedral. The chapter hired the master builder, dispensed the payroll, kept the records, and bought materials. They appointed one of their own to be custos fabricae, or keeper of the fabric, to personally administer all these tasks and to keep the tons of supplies and materials flowing to the builders. Clearly, the most important material was stone, and chapters generally bought or started their own quarries. It was extremely difficult and expensive carting stone, so quarries were located as close to the worksite as was possible. Another crucial and expensive item was timber, especially the long, heavy beams required for the roof. But by the end of the 13th century, there weren't many trees left in northern France that could meet these requirements, so most of the wood had to be shipped in from other countries. Many of the building trades are proudly displayed in the stained glass and carvings. All in all, building a cathedral was a tremendously expensive, time-consuming, and intricate process. In fact, it still is. "43 individual trades are represented in the stained glass at Chartres, showing not only the integration of secular and religious life in the Middle Ages, but the tremendous pride in craftsmanship that had its prime showcase in the cathedral."